What if true greatness wasn't measured by divine birth, but by humility? What if a so-called demon king, an Asura, was so just, so beloved, and so noble that even the gods felt threatened, not by his evil, but by his virtue? Welcome to the tale of Mahabali, the mighty king who ruled not with fear or force, but with fairness, generosity, and unwavering devotion to Dharma. In the sacred tradition of Ancient Bharat, stories are more than myths. They are mirrors, reflecting timeless truths about power, ego, sacrifice, and balance. And in the story of Mahabali and the Vamana avatar of Vishnu, we find one of the most layered, paradoxical, and profoundly philosophical legends ever told. Long ago, during the Treta Yuga, when the cycles of creation were still turning in their early phases, a king emerged from the Asura lineage who challenged every stereotype associated with his kind. He was Mahabali, grandson of the great Prahlada, the devotee who had defied his demon father, Hiranyakashipu, to stand in faith before Lord Narasimha. The blood of devotion already ran in Bali's veins, but unlike his grandfather, Mahabali was also a statesman, a warrior, and a visionary. From his capital in the region that is now Kerala, his rule spread far and wide. But unlike most kings who sought expansion for greed or domination, Bali's mission was different. He wanted to create a world where truth, compassion, equality, and prosperity reigned supreme. His people were never overtaxed. Injustice was unheard of, and discrimination had no place in his courts. The rivers flowed freely, the harvests were abundant, and no one went to sleep hungry or in fear. His land was not just a kingdom. It was an ideal, a dharmic utopia, something even the Devas had not been able to achieve in their heavenly realms. The sage poets say, under Mahabali's rule, there were no lies, no corruption, no theft, and no poverty. And for this, he was loved. But this unprecedented success disturbed the cosmic balance. The Devas, who had fought endless battles against Asuras for the supremacy of the three worlds, now felt their grip loosening, not because of war, but because of goodwill. Mahabali, though an Asura, had begun to eclipse even Indra in glory. His popularity among sages, his piety in rituals, and his adherence to Vedic codes elevated him beyond the traditional dualities of Deva and Asura. And that, ironically, became the problem. The Devas, alarmed, turned once more to Lord Vishnu, the eternal sustainer of balance. But this time, Vishnu did not pick up his Sudarshana chakra. He did not ride into battle upon Garuda. Instead, he descended in a form so subtle, so unassuming, that it caught everyone by surprise. He came as Vamana, a young dwarf Brahmin boy, short in stature, yet cosmic in potential. Vamana appeared during one of Mahabali's most grand spiritual rituals, a massive Ashwamedha Yajna, meant to declare Bali's dominion over the three worlds and solidify his name in the stars. During such yajnas, kings were expected to fulfill the wishes of any Brahmin who asked. When the boy arrived, Mahabali, ever respectful of the learned, greeted him with folded hands. Vamana asked for something seemingly trivial: 3 paces of land, measured by his own tiny feet. The entire court laughed at the absurdity. What would a king like Bali, whose gifts could fill oceans, do with such a meager request? But Bali, ever noble, smiled and agreed. Yet his guru, the wise but wary Shukracharya, sensed something deeper. Through his divine insight, he saw the truth. This was no ordinary Brahmin. This was Vishnu in disguise. He warned Bali, "Do not give this gift. You are being tricked. He will take everything." But Bali, the Dharmic king, replied, "If it is truly Lord Vishnu, then what greater blessing is there than to give everything to him with my own hands? And so, the vow was sealed. In that moment, the transformation began. The little boy Vamana began to expand, growing taller, wider, vaster. His body became the cosmos. He became Trivikrama, the giant form of Vishnu that spanned creation. With his first step, he covered all of earth. With his second, he stretched across the heavens. And then he asked, "O king, where shall I place my third step?" Now with nothing left to give, Bali bowed his head and said, "Place it upon me, my lord." With divine grace, Vishnu set his foot on Bali's crown. Not as a gesture of punishment, but of blessing. Bali was pushed down into Sutala, a subterranean realm, but not as a prisoner. Instead, he was granted a kingdom there greater than anything he had known on earth. He was given immortality, honor, and most beautifully, the promise that Vishnu himself would stand guard at his door, ever present with him. But this wasn't exile, it was transcendence. Mahabali had passed the ultimate test, not of battle, but of ego. He had proven that even when all was taken from him, his faith and humility remained unshaken. And for that, he was not erased, but enshrined. So beloved was Mahabali that he was granted the boon to return once every year to visit his people, to see the land he once ruled, and to bless it again with his presence. That return is celebrated every year as Onam, the grand festival of Kerala. And in that celebration lies a profound paradox. The people rejoice not the victory of Vishnu, nor the defeat of an Asura, but the return of a just and noble king whose love for his people and Dharma transcended divine politics. During Onam, homes are decorated with puka lamps, intricate floral patterns. Families gather in white and gold clothes, partake in the Onam Sadhya, a feast of countless vegetarian dishes served on banana leaves. Children reenact the Vamana story. Boat races fill the rivers. And everywhere, the presence of Mahabali is felt, not as a myth, but as a memory, alive in spirit. In a world obsessed with binaries, good versus evil, gods versus demons, the story of Mahabali teaches something radical, that virtue is not limited by birth, that an Asura can be more righteous than the Devas, that even the gods bow before true humility, and that the greatest kings are not those who conquer land, but those who conquer ego. The tale of Mahabali is not about defeat, it is about dignity, it is about surrender, not as weakness, but as spiritual mastery. His sacrifice wasn't forced, it was offered, and in that act, he became eternal. Even Vishnu, the sustainer of the universe, took the form of a beggar, not to take, but to remind us that nothing we possess is truly ours, that all power, all glory must eventually bow to Dharma, that sometimes, to rise, one must kneel, and so Mahabali rose, not as emperor of 3 worlds, but as emperor of hearts. His story lives on, not just in scriptures, but in songs, in flowers, in feasts, and in the eyes of every child who lights a lamp during Onam. In a time where rulers seek control, Mahabali reminds us to seek service. In a world that honors might, his life honors surrender. And in a culture that knows the difference between wealth and wisdom, his name is whispered like a prayer. Remember this tale not as a distant myth, but as a living guide of how even the greatest among us must sometimes step aside for balance to prevail, and of how the divine doesn't just reside in temples or heavens, but in the humility of a heart willing to give, and the courage to bow when it matters most. This is not just the story of Vamana, it is the story of Mahabali, the king who gave everything, and in return became immortal in the soul of Bharat.